You're an animal.
I'm an animal.
We are animals. So Ben, you're a vegan activist. Tell us more about yourself.
I'm a vegan activist. I started doing activism about 24 seconds after I went vegan, because I've always had that activism blood running through me. Before, it was mostly human rights and, against like the banking systems and these oppressive systems. But then once I made this connection that, veganism was about justice, like I couldn't stay quiet, right? And that was actually what made me, make that step, was learning that veganism wasn't just, these people choosing not to eat animals for some reason, right? Other than that, I am just a regular person. I like playing video games and going for walks and...
So I want to catch on that point. You said you became an activist 24 seconds after you went vegan. So that's insane. I think that's amazing. Can you tell us what made you go vegan and what made you become an activist in those 24 seconds as well?
Yeah, I mean, shout out to my friend Ray, because she's the one who told me to watch this documentary called The Cove. If you haven't seen it, definitely go watch it. What I learned from that documentary just pissed me off so much. The first thing I had to do was like tell the whole world. Like, how did I not know that this was going on? And then as soon as I started posting about this, some of my friends were already like pushing back and some were agreeing, and it was kind of this like interesting like thing online that I didn't realize that certain people wouldn't care about animals. And this was about dolphins. Because I was so receptive to that documentary, she recommended I also watch Cowspiracy. And I watched Cowspiracy, and it kind of like got me thinking about some stuff, but it didn't really like hit me that hard. Like, I was still sharing a lot about Sea Shepherd and about these dolphins. And then I guess, Instagram must have, thought I was vegan or something, because it was actually Facebook. So it started showing me vegan content. The first thing I opened, that was this speech. It said like this, it wasn't Gary Oxley, I don't even remember who it was. I think it was maybe James Aspie or something, or it was a speech where some guy was talking about slavery. But at the end of the speech, he said, you probably thought I was talking about black people slaves, but I was actually talking about farmers and cows. And I was like, holy smokes. I realized that this was about justice, that I was a hypocrite. I actually called myself an animal lover, and then realized that that was the opposite of what I was doing. And so I went to the mirror, looked at myself. Do I want to be a hypocrite or do I want to be a vegan? It was an easy choice. And then I went to Instagram and started sharing out what I knew. And that was it.
So do you think, just like you went vegan and then you became an activist as soon as possible, within 24 seconds you said, do you think everyone should follow the same?
Well, I mean, to understand what veganism truly is to understand that it's a movement, right? And when you understand it's a movement, you understand that there's victims involved and there's oppressors involved, right? And so if you can see and recognize that there's victims and you don't care about that, then, that's you, I guess. I can't really tell you to care about the victims. But, I think if you stand for justice and you have like a strong foundation for what type of character you are, you'll recognize that this is wrong. And then you will recognize that you need to speak up and do something about it, right? I'm not going to tell you how to advocate or what, works best for you. You could figure that out yourself. But at the very least, make sure you get people to understand that this isn't funny, this isn't a joke, and even just explaining what veganism is to them properly, so that they understand it's not just a diet and it's not just a bunch of crazy people who don't want to eat animals for no reason, then that's at the very least, something. But, I think that, yeah, when we recognize the scale of this injustice and how many victims there are, we all need to speak up, do our part, and fight for them.
So you spoke on how we should word our messages. So I think what you have been trying to do as well, you have been trying to help the activists to speak more precisely and use the precise terms when they speak. So, how important do you think it is to use the preciseness in that language?
Yeah, I mean, the message we send is ultimately the message for the victims, right? And so if we're using ambiguous language or the message is ambiguous, then we're not actually doing them any kind of service, right? And so I think, the terms are very important, but not as important as the message that you're trying to send, right? And what I've noticed is that for people who are struggling with the message, removing certain terms from their vocabulary of advocating will actually just help them send a stronger message, right? So yes, the words are important, but especially like if you're on the street or if you're talking to somebody, you usually don't have like 24 hours to just sit and explain all the things, right? So if you have a small amount of time, it's very important that, you use the right words, you send the right message, but the power in it is that you actually aren't giving the person you're talking to ammo to come back at you and create a debate with you. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
So,
So I think that's very important that you need to send the message across in the shortest amount of time when you're doing an outreach. What about your family and friends? Do you think the message needs to be tailored according to the reciprocativeness, or do you think the same flow chart should be followed while talking to them as well?
well, with your friends and family, you probably know them a lot better, right? You know what their interests are, you know what drives them, and that kind of thing. So I think with your friends and family, you can actually tailor the conversation. You can still use the flow chart, but tailor it to their language, right? If your family's religious, speak like their language, use religion. Or if they're not religious, obviously don't use religion, right? Or if you know that, your friend cares about dolphins, tell them to watch The Cove, right? Get them to break from this mentality that I know everything, that all these animals are treated really nicely and really well. And, I love dolphins, and that's why she recommended me that documentary to watch. And it broke me open to then
Right.
realizing that, I don't know what's actually happening in the world. And I actually went swimming with the dolphins one time. So I actually was perpetuating that. And that actually made me so mad at myself that I would actually go and spend that money not knowing that, like, how in my world would I ever have known that that was happening, right? So, take a road that's not necessarily like being lenient with the message, but, cater to what you know about them and what they're passionate about.
So when some people say that it's okay for them to eat animals because their God said so, specifically pointing out to the religious texts, what do you say to them?
Well, one, it depends on what religion, but no religion, promotes, violence or exploitation or, this supremacist mentality, right? So anybody who's using religion is one of two types of people. Is somebody who's actually just trying to find excuses and they go in that direction. And then there's people who are genuinely religious who probably have been conditioned by their religion into actually thinking that, but they genuinely want to be good people, right? So for every religion, as an activist, you should have under your belt a question that gets you to qualify whether they are just like a troll who's finding excuses with religion, or if there's somebody who actually truly cares about religion, being a good person, and morality and that kind of thing, right? So if you find that somebody is actually somebody who's open to being wrong about what their current understanding of their religion is, then you can actually have a genuine conversation with them and maybe reach them. And it actually doesn't take long. So I'll use one example that I get all the time. And then on the street, actually, it's God put animals on this planet for us. And I'm like, are you willing to be wrong about that, right? And then I'll have to go to the first or second page of the Bible to show them that actually God created animals first and that he created us to be their rulers. And as rulers, we're supposed to protect and serve them, right? And then that person is either going to be like, oh, you're wrong, try and make up some excuse, even though it's right in front of them, or they're going to be like, holy smokes, I never realized that. And then some people have even thanked me for showing them that truth, right? And so from there, they can act accordingly, right? If they want to ask more questions, like I might entertain a question or two, but from that point, at least I know they're open now because they've admit to me that God didn't actually create animals for them. You know what I mean? So that
Right.
would be my tip for activists is, learn about the religions enough that you are able to kind of navigate just at a basic level these conversations.
Right. So, do you follow any religion or any spiritual path yourself?
I don't need to I don't need to talk about that here, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I
Oh,
know a lot about a lot of religions, and I think that all of them, at the end of the day, have this one golden underlying thread of truth, and that is that we should be treating others the way that we want to be treated, and others includes our animal brothers and sisters as well.
so, when you became a vegan and then an activist 24 seconds later, what kind of activism did you do, and how did you find out about AV?
So first, I mean, I did the only thing I knew how to do was post online and speak with my friends, my family, whoever else I could. I was also at that time owner of a restaurant. So in my restaurant, I added a vegan menu. I started, making like we did a vegan kafta kebab, and then I was walking around my restaurant giving free samples to everybody without telling them, what it was. And like from Calgary, like veganism is like nobody knows about it. It's not where here as everyone's heard it in the stores. You see vegan food or anything. When I was telling people that this was made from plants, like they thought I was actually like joking with them or something. And some people couldn't even comprehend. Like they thought I was like on space talking to somebody else in some different conversation when I was saying that this wasn't, any animal flesh, right? And it was kind of interesting to see that. But again, just giving somebody that vegan food, they're like, okay, this is good, that's cool. The next time they came, they didn't order that, right? Because I wasn't talking about justice, right? I'm just giving people some food, and then even though it tastes good, like
Right.
that's not. So that's how I quickly learned that just trying to give people good tasting food doesn't really accomplish anything.
Right.
And then I found out about AV during the pandemic. It was during the George Floyd time. And it was really bothering me how all my friends, everybody around me was just talking about being anti-oppression, because that was the first big event, I think, that happened in the world that everybody was talking about justice and blah, blah. But, all these people aren't vegan. So
Right.
I just, like, the hypocrisy was really, like, boiling. And
So you're saying that someone can't be against oppression and eat animals at the same time?
Absolutely. So I made a post on Facebook that got a lot of attention. And it was essentially like, if you're not vegan, then you're not against oppression, right? And then on this, like, I started getting like all these people hating me, blocking me. I got some death threats on there. And most of the people were trying to tell me that even as vegans, like, this is bad timing. And, at that point, like, I didn't really have many vegan friends or anything. And then when these vegans were messaging me, I was actually starting to doubt myself that, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said this. And then I came across this post where one of the vegans that was actually criticizing me shared this post that I seen for the first time, where these people were marching with this pig on, like, this head of a pig on a stick, and it was a BLM march. But they shared, this was a post that Anonymous for the Voiceless had made, but she shared this post bashing Anonymous for the Voiceless. And then, I could see, like, hey, this organization is actually, like, this is what I'm sharing, right? Like, we're the ones, even in the face of this other injustice happening to me, and if it's an injustice, it's an injustice. You shouldn't be perpetuating that ever, right? It's not like we need to give, like, a week to this injustice, a week to this injustice, or anything like that. So I started really resonating. I found out who they were. I found out there was a chapter in Calgary, and then I went and joined, and
The city where you live.
yeah, and instantly went out and did a cube with them, and then everything kind of changed from there.
So while doing activism, what's something a new activist should have in mind, and what mistakes do they usually do?
The first thing that you have in mind is what your goal is. Are you trying to raise awareness? Are you trying to hold people accountable, call to action, or, what is your goal? So the thing that I see the most is people actually limit themselves in how high of a goal that they set, right? So the goal when you're talking to anybody should be that you want this person to be a vegan activist, right? Somebody who's going to speak up for this injustice.
Wait, vegan activist, right?
Right? But most people go in just like, hey, well, I'm just gonna ask them a question, and maybe they'll think about it, and maybe they'll reduce, or maybe they'll stop eating meat on Mondays or something like that. For myself, if I'm not going into the conversation with this, goal in mind, then one, I'm robbing that person of who they could potentially become, and also I'm robbing the victims of the message that's the most beneficial for them. On the street, like everybody we speak to wants to be respecting animals, wants to be loving animals, and all that kind of stuff, right? So when I go into a conversation, right, if I go into the conversation like, oh, this person doesn't want to be vegan, this person doesn't want to be respecting animals, this person wants to be an animal oppressor, what precedent am I already setting for how this interaction is going to go, right? So if my goal is that this person is going to be a vegan activist after this conversation I have with them, this person wants to be a vegan, like why wouldn't you actually want to be a vegan activist, right? Why wouldn't you want to be the one fighting up for these innocent victims? Like a lot of people I see are going into conversations thinking that they're a bother, that veganism is just like, this like hindrance and this inconvenience to people, right? And so it's coming from a place or from a lack of confidence, right? So I see lots of activists lacking this confidence in their own beliefs, and I mean the belief is something that is pretty much shared across the whole population that animals don't exist for us. This is a majority belief, but non-veganism is the majority practice, right? So I think as activists, we need to be more confident in actually believing that people want to make this change, because people actually do care, and people prove us wrong in that every day, that they want to make that change.
When you're doing an outreach, if someone says to you, well, they can't go vegan, but they can try to go vegetarian or pescatarian, or they can do meatless Mondays, what do you say to them?
I would never validate that. Injustice is injustice. It's not okay to rape women only on Mondays, right? I would never say that. And if you would say that, then there's probably something wrong there, right? But if you're still saying that, you should reduce, you should at least do meatless Mondays or whatever, you're clearly probably not understanding this injustice, right? And the only way to really understand this injustice is to try and put yourself into the position of any animal victim, to see what they're going through. And you wouldn't trade like a moment with them, right? And if you wouldn't trade a moment with them, then why do they deserve to be there in the first place? Why is it that you feel like you can reduce your message to like, oh yeah, let them, be exploited 7 days of the week, but Mondays, they can be exploited on Mondays. Like to me, it doesn't make sense.
A lot of people have this utilitarian notion that, well, if someone does meatless Mondays, they're at least killing less animals. Do you think that's effective? Do you think that actually helps with the movement?
I don't think so. I probably actually, I can say that I know so, but again, I'm just always learning. But ultimately, if from my perspective, let's say there's two criminals, right? There's two murderers, right? At the end of the day, if you're a murderer, you're a murderer, right? You have this mentality that it's justifiable to murder if the situation calls for it, right? And so if you have that mentality, let's say you've murdered 2 people or somebody else has murdered 7 people, Is that person worse because he's murdered 7 people than the guy who's murdered 2 people? From my perspective, no, because that mentality exists inside of both of them. But maybe this guy has just had more interactions with people who have triggered that, or maybe he has more money or more means, or, you know, whatever it might be, more motivation, right? So to me, it's not necessarily how many victims you're creating, which is the problem. It's the mentality behind that even, you know, gives you this belief that you can do that to somebody else, right?
Right.
So when it comes to animals, for example, it's human supremacy. If you have this mentality, you know, even if you're only creating 1 victim per year, you're still exercising the supremacist mentality, right? If you're going out and only hunting 1 animal and that animal's feeding you, or whether you're, you know, going and, you know, killing 100 chickens to feed you for the rest of the year, at the end of the day, it's that same mentality, right? And that's what we're trying to abolish. This isn't some calculation to me that, you know, we need to just reduce the numbers so that there's less and less victims, you know. Not to say that, you know, every life matters, every single individual matters, and they all shouldn't be there. And if you're, you know, doing rescues and that kind of thing, like, I think that's so powerful, because if I was in that position, I would still want to be rescued.
Right.
Right. But that is ultimately a symptom. And so, you know, for me, I like to attack the root of the problem rather than just try and manage the symptom.
Right.
So I think the only way to fully abolish this mentality of human supremacy is to focus on the mentality of human supremacy. Go to the root and try and get rid of that, and then everything else falls
Right.
into place.
So there's no more victims. There's no victims that you have to save.
Exactly.
Right.
There's always going to be victims as long as human supremacy exists.
So that's the root cause you want people to fight for and try to eradicate the problem from there.
And not necessarily like people to fight for, but I think it's what we should be fighting for, right? Again, if you're doing rescues, if you have sanctuary, like, that's all part of this. You know, once we rescue these individuals, right, they need a refuge. It's a place to sanctuary, right? A place to be protected and allowed to be able to live out their life in peace, right? So if you're opening a sanctuary, that is necessary, right? But to those who are advocating, right, I would advocate that you should advocate this way, that you should attack the root, right? If you attack the root, then no more branches will grow.
I don't know if this counts as attacking the root, but some people say that we have to make systematic changes. We have to change the governments, we have to change the organizations around us, we have to change the system, basically. So do you think there are different ways to approach this same issue, or do you think abolitionism is the key towards solving the whole problem?
I think that's where it starts. I don't think that, like, just being abolitionist is going to, like, get us all the way there. Maybe I can't predict the future. But when we look at other justice movements, abolitionists were the ones who took the movement from nothing to something, which created systemic change, right? And it was ultimately getting enough individuals to be part of this movement, moving together with one unified goal, was when, you know, if we look at slavery, when there was enough people against slavery, investors stopped investing into plantations, or at least they started diversifying their investments into other places. Because if all my investments are in plantations, and I can see that there's this movement growing towards, like, you know, this other, or towards ending this, and potentially, and if you are actually genuinely smart, you'll recognize that there is a huge injustice here. Like, these people are being, you know, exploited, you know, in ways that would be unthinkable for yourself, right? So obviously, like, these things aren't going to, you know, hold for very long, right? So as investors, you're seeing people kind of, you know, start to fight against this, and there's traction, and, you know, okay, shit, like, I care about my money, so what am I going to do? I'm going to invest, I'm going to hedge. I'm going to invest in companies that are doing creating these products or something, but without slavery, right? So when we have enough abolitionists, when we're able to really put this pressure on, right, that's when shit actually starts to change, right? It's not just we're reducing anymore. This is when change comes, right? So you can go to the government yourself, but I mean, I don't know what are they going to really do, right? The only way for us to really
Right.
push systemic change is if we actually have a majority. We're
Right.
not there yet. So, if you want to be going and if you think that you can be effective in that field, I'm not going to stop you. But to be able to really pressure government, to be able to really pressure something systemic, we need more individuals. This needs to be less normal, and it needs to be absolutely rejected in society.
What are your feelings after doing activism?
I mean, when I look around and I see all the people who have come together, sometimes from all over the world, dedicating their time, spending their resources for this cause, it's so inspiring to me, And I see people who truly care. I see people who can really, be selfless. And, throughout the whole, day or a couple hours that we're there, actually seeing people make this change right in front of us. People declaring that they are going to go vegan, people declaring that they're going to become active, and people who even joining us right there and, holding a TV for 5 minutes. Like, this is powerful stuff, right? And this only gives us even more fire, right? It means that we're growing. It means people actually do care. It means that the truth actually holds power. And it reminds us that we have truth on our side. So when I finish any activism event, it used to kind of drain me because my mentality going in was like, why would somebody want to be vegan? And I'm here just kind of like, bothering people, to becoming as effective as I possibly could be. And as an organization, becoming as effective as we possibly could be. And now, there's just so many things that keep lifting you up, and just more hope and more hope every time we finish one of these events.
There's also one effect that happens in the community, that people often have a burnout from doing too much activism. And when I see you, I never see you doing anything else apart from activism. That's all you do the whole year, many cubes a month, a week. So how do you manage to do that? How do you manage to keep yourself sane and be in your senses? Especially it can get a lot for some people, for some activists. So what do you have to say on that? What's your key for success there?
So for me, one thing I think that isn't talked about enough is I stopped being hard on myself. And I started understanding that activism wasn't just being there on the street for 3 hours or 6 hours. Activism was about how I slept. It's about what I ate. It's about taking vacations. It's about being able to manage my energy, walking away from people who aren't ready for the message, removing my ego, thinking that I could convince anybody and everybody to be vegan. It was about removing debates from the outreach and from my activism. I'm not here to debate somebody because veganism and justice is never up for debate. And also surrounding myself with people who, I can actually relate with, connect with. We can become serious and do activism together. And then afterwards, it's like a family, right?
Right.
And so there's so much of just your lifestyle that goes into not burning out. But then, the most powerful thing that I feel is being effective. If you are effective, you will not burn out because you will actually be able to see the change that you're making, right? And if you can see that you're actually making a change, that's just going to keep adding energy, right? If you talk to, 20 people in a row and none of them, are going to make a declaration, if, nothing happens and you're not accomplishing anything, that's going to drain you. You're going to be like, I can't do this. This isn't working. I want to do something different, or I'm just going to stop all in all because, this is never going to happen. We're never going to see a vegan world, right? But if you're after those 20 conversations sitting, okay, what could I have done differently? How could I come back here next time and be more effective? And you actually analyze, write some notes, record yourself, watch your footage back, learn, see what I did, body language, what did I say, how was I saying it, come back more effective. And then next time you actually get some people making declarations, right, then that is going to be uplifting, right? And that's going to motivate you and encourage you. And then the more effective you become, now we're at a point where we've just, gotten to a place where what we have is super effective, right? And it's only going to get better. And as more vegans appear around the world, this becomes more normal. Vegans aren't just these outcasts, right? We're not part of this out group anymore, right? And so, yeah, just learn, grow, become more effective, and that's ultimately I think the most powerful thing, especially with street outreach or talking with your friends and family, that you could do to get rid of that burnout.
So one thing you said before, that veganism is not up for debate. But how do you expect to understand this issue without debating something? I think everything in this world, it's subject to debate. You see that on news channels, you see that on Facebook, Instagram, people are debating on every single thing out there, any issue, or even if there isn't any issue, they're still debating. So why do you think this is not up for debate?
Well, I mean, there's something interesting because I came across this this guy who's a master of debating, and he was ultimately debating for pedophilia. Okay, and he would have people come and debate him who didn't know anything about debate, because debate is a skill. Right. So this guy already knew all of the other person's arguments, right? And so when they came in, he actually made them look like a fool, and they couldn't actually prove to this guy that pedophilia is wrong through debate, because they weren't, equipped to have a debate, right?
So you're saying that's a skill, that's a very niche thing, debating.
Yeah, so if one person has the skill and the other person doesn't have the skill, then you're going to lose, right?
Even if you are on the right side, you can still lose
even
if you don't have the skills.
Even if you're on the right side, even if the other person knows you're on the right side, but again, so when you're having a debate, you're having something intellectual, a conversation that's about who's smarter, who knows more about the other side, and all these other things, right? So if you are entering into a debate with somebody, you may not realize what they're going to say, the gotcha that they might have, and if you aren't equipped to be able to even respond in the best way, then you might lose that debate on this topic specifically, right? Even though you know that you are right. So what you're actually doing when you're entering into a debate with somebody, the purpose of a debate is for two people with two valid ideas to come together and try and find a middle ground or convince somebody of their side, and essentially figure out. So these are supposed to be productive, discussions that we have. But when it comes to veganism, if you agree to go into a debate with somebody else, you're instantly validating their position as a valid position that they can hold, that animals exist for us, right? Why would you ever enter into that situation with somebody, right? So where I found power is every time somebody wants to debate me, I'll say, hey, I'm not going to have a debate with you. If you want to have a discussion, I'm open.
A genuine discussion.
A genuine discussion.
So how do you know if someone is having a genuine discussion or a debate?
So, I mean, I've had people message me, hey, do you want to have a debate about this? And I'm like, no. One, I'm not a master of debating. And two, I know that my position is the only valid position here, right? I know that this is an injustice and that this is wrong. So I'm not going to entertain your opinion or your side as valid. So I'm only going to have a discussion with you, right? And now that I have, been doing activism for a long time, I know to always, keep control of the conversation, right? And to keep my power. If somebody wants to enter into a debate with me and goes down these rabbit holes, I don't need to do that. I don't need any numbers. I don't need any facts or statistics to show that what's happening to these individuals is an injustice. So I'm not going to entertain, debate.
Using this formal logic tricks or the skills, they can justify any position when you are the one who is not equipped with the side you're defending.
Yeah. At the end of the day, stats and facts and whatever, may convince someone to go plant-based, but veganism is about justice, and if you're thinking about it too much and intellectualizing it too much, you get a lot of people going back from veganism or whatever they call it, right? But I always say this, veganism starts the moment you realize or you recognize that you're the oppressor and you no longer want to be an oppressor. right? So if the conversation isn't holding somebody accountable, holding up a mirror to show them their oppressive mentality, they're not going to get it. They're not going to make this realization. They might change their behavior and try plant-based foods for a little bit, but that doesn't get us to where we need to get to.
I have a lot of people saying that who are you to shove your opinion on us and what gives you the authority? Well, then I'm tempted to say that I'm a master of law, I've studied animal law, but I feel like that's even unnecessary. You don't have to be a master of philosophy or master of law or master of ethics to understand this issue. So do you think like someone actually does need to have a formal knowledge or education about this?
No. I just say justice is an opinion. If you were a slave, you wouldn't care about anybody else's opinion, right? This is the reality. I am your victim. I want to be free, so set me free. That's it. And if you're in any kind of position like that, you would understand it. So, and if you don't have the ability to recognize that, then you have probably some other problems, right? You're closed-minded or whatever. I don't need to talk to you if you already don't recognize this, right? If we go back to like the systemic change thing, let's say that is true, right? We need to get those numbers first before we can make the systemic change, right? So I want to find the people who are ready, who are open, the low-hanging fruit, the people who actually like have a strong character to make a change when they recognize that they're living in misalignment, when they're being hypocrites, right? I don't need to try and convince the psychopaths to go vegan right now. Eventually, they'll have no other choice.
How do emotions come into play while doing activism? Are you supposed to show emotions or you're supposed to mask them and behave a certain way and have certain facial expressions and certain tone while speaking to someone?
I think the first and most important thing is to be yourself, right? So if you're an emotional person, or if you're not an emotional person, if you don't want to be an emotional person, don't play a role. Don't act and this isn't a performance, right? So if you are feeling sad, be sad. If you're angry, that's okay as well, right? But the one problem I see is people actually become slaves to their emotion and they lose control. And so make sure that you're not losing control when it comes to the emotions that you're feeling.
Right.
Right? So if you're getting angry, it's okay to be angry, right? But don't lose your control. Don't see red and just start, going off, right? What happens in that situation is you're actually giving your power away, right? And when you give your power away, you're essentially giving your energy away, and that person actually got the upper hand in the conversation, right? So it's important to keep in control. Recognize that you're getting angry. Maybe just like understand, hey, this conversation right now is making me angry. I don't want to continue this, right? And just walk away. What I've seen is somebody's really understanding this and they're actually getting sad, right? And sometimes they'll be crying in front of you when they're watching the footage or something. Sometimes that makes other people sad, right? But then when that person gets sad, they start to lose themselves in the sadness. They forget that the point of the conversation was still to hold them accountable and to run the flow chart on them, right? So they start to kind of like maybe get away from the purpose of that conversation because of the sadness, right? So recognize that their sad is making you sad, but don't let that steer you away from the message that you're ultimately trying to send as well. So your emotions and their emotions are important in the conversation as well. If they're getting angry, maybe it's also not really worth spending and wasting your time with them. So, but this all comes, I think, with experience, with practice, and also like as you grow, just being able to learn how to manage your emotions, identify your emotions, and be able to really work with them and control them.
Right. So you basically described stoicism in a nutshell. What do you think is the most effective way of speaking and most effective emotion to have when you're speaking to someone?
Yeah, just be real, right? People recognize that, right? If you're being a robot, if you're playing a part, if you're acting, right, there's no genuineness behind, right? I think they can pick that out. So just be a person, be real, be you, and just have a conversation.
But if someone is smiling while having this conversation, Do you not think that takes a seriousness away from this issue?
I don't I don't think so, because humor, satire, like all these things have been powerful tools to get people to recognize, the hypocrisy, severity of things, right? So I don't necessarily feel like there's, uh, you know, when it comes to like your facial expression, you need to be serious. I don't think that that's necessarily true, right? I think with your messaging, right, with just how you present yourself should be serious. But if you happen to be smiling or talking, like at the end of the day, remember, like they are not our enemy. The person that you're talking to is not the enemy until they've heard the message, they've been held accountable, and if they choose to walk away from that, continuing to, perpetuate this injustice, now they've made that conscious choice. But up until then, they are just another human who probably hasn't heard this message, who hasn't been held accountable. And so, at that point, just again, be you. If you need to smile, smile. If you need to, be serious, be serious. Whatever it is, just whoever you are, don't let that slip away.
So when you talk to non-vegans, the second question you ask them, do you think humans should respect animals? So why do you use the word respect there?
Okay, so first, one of the things that we've learned, we shouldn't be talking about how people think. We should be talking about how people feel, right? And there's actually something very interesting about the word respect, because veganism is about not exploiting animals, but respect at the very basic level is essentially respecting someone's bodily autonomy and their right to live free from exploitation, right? But when I became vegan, it wasn't necessarily that I just kind of like found out about it and then I thought this was a cool idea and then I jumped on board. It was my values that I already held were that we should be caring and going above and beyond for animals. And that's actually what I thought I was doing. Like if I saw a bird with, their wing broken, I would actually go out of my way to help them, right? And so, even though veganism focuses only on exploitation, the word respect actually, in a way, could have a higher ask in there, right? Like, for example, like it wouldn't be respectful to also abuse an animal, right? Even though it's possible to abuse somebody without exploiting them, respect actually asks for a little bit
Right.
more. And so not only is it that that question maybe might give us more than that person just being vegan, it might actually also end other injustices like abuse, which is, something that people actually have to go out of their way for sometimes, right? Because neglect could be abuse. Locking a dog in your car could be abuse, right? So
Without exploitation.
without exploitation, right? So again, when I always say like you set the goal a little bit higher, right? Respect does include the non-exploitation, but you could actually potentially ask for more through there. And so for me, veganism isn't the goal, right? Veganism is the baseline. Once the world reaches that point where at least we're not exploiting other animals, everything else can come on top of that. And I think there's a famous quote, I don't know if it's by Gandhi, that says that like we as humans are essentially doomed until we start treating animals better and leaving them alone or something. I don't,
Right.
I'm
So,
like,
yeah, I think I know the
completely
quote
forgetting the
is
quote.
the progress of the society is judged by how humans treat other non-human animals in the society.
Yeah.
So
So
is that the quote you're trying to say?
yeah. So for me, I truly believe that abolishing human supremacy will just make us better people in all other aspects as well, right? And so for me, my goal is like a compassionate world, right? Where people are compassionate to animals and,
Right.
hopefully also compassionate to other humans, right? And, when it comes to this other phrase I hear all the time, it's like, if you're racist, you can't be vegan, right? Or if you're, other things and you can't be vegan, as if like veganism has some kind of like condition in that way, right?
Right.
Like, let's say, for example, everybody becomes vegan tomorrow, right? Do I think that people the racists are going to still exist? Yes. People are racists are still going to exist. Is war going to disappear? No, it's not going to disappear. There's still going to be genocide. There's still going to be, people committing all these crimes. Right? So I'm not saying that veganism solves all the problems necessarily, and that, for the people who say that if you're not against this oppression, you're not vegan, it's completely wrong. You're completely missing the point. But a vegan world sets the foundation for us to recognize that, hey, this was the first form of supremacy that we eradicated. Now we can start addressing the rest. Not that they don't need to be addressed right now, but I think it still builds that solid foundation.
So when someone becomes a vegan, do you think it's their moral obligation to speak up for the animals as well?
I've said this to people before. Veganism is a movement. If you truly understand the definition and the purpose of why it was created and all these, foundational elements of it, if you don't want to be pushing for this objective, the objective is to end all exploitation of non-human animals at the hand of the human animal, then why do you want to consider yourself vegan or part of this movement, right? If you're just a plant-based consumer and you're consuming all these plant-based products and no animal products, then you're just from my perspective, plant-based. I'm not gonna, care to exclude you from the vegan community. I don't want to tell somebody they're not vegan. I don't need to purity test somebody, say, oh, you're not vegan if you're not doing this, or you're vegan if you're doing this, or whatever, right? But I genuinely want to know why you want to be labeling yourself as a vegan or whatever if you don't actually hold this same vision, right? So if you recognize, if you've done your research, if you studied veganism, you know that when it was defined in 1951 as a principle, and then you understand what the objective is. The principle is that humans should live without exploiting animals, and the objective is to end all exploitation of animals by humans, right? The only way you're going to get there is to be active, to move with the movement, right? So if you don't share these same values and this same vision, all you essentially are doing is you're perpetuating the notion that it's okay to just be vegan and not do anything, right? Then you start to actually distort what veganism is, because now you've said it's possible to be vegan and just sit around and not do anything. Right? So from my perspective, it's not even an identity, right? Veganism is not an identity. So I barely like to call myself vegan or say that I'm a vegan, because it also kind of distorts a little bit. But for the sake of people in our society, and they have this understanding now, we have to be saying this, right? If the whole world all of a sudden is no longer exploiting animals for anything anymore, I'm not just a vegan. No, we're not all now vegan, right? The mission of this movement has been accomplished.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, we're all still human beings. We're just human beings who don't exploit animals anymore.
Right.
Right.
So it's a baseline then. The word vegan wouldn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
Anything specific.
Yeah. It's something that unifies us with one mission, one goal, and one principle.
Right.
Right. And so, if you're not moving with that, that's my question, is why do you want to be, labeling yourself as a vegan? Why are you making it to be a lifestyle? Why are you making it to be an identity? Why are you making it to be a choice?
So basically that's similar to how you outreach to non-vegans. You ask similar questions. Do you think it's okay for someone else to exploit animals, or do you think...
do you feel?
Do you feel? Okay. Wait, do you feel if it's okay for someone else to exploit the animals, and should we be speaking up for them, and how would we want someone else to speak up if we were in the victim's place?
Yeah, exactly. If you don't have any knowledge of what to say or how to say it or anything as an activist, all you have to do is, if I was being enslaved, what would I want people to say or do to free me? And if you're talking from that perspective, there's nothing wrong that you could possibly say.
Do you think you get validation from the society when you are an activist? Do you think that's something you seek?
Well, I became an activist because I wanted to make a lot of money. So
I didn't expect the funny answer.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm doing this. I'm doing this for myself. I think every activist is doing this for themselves. They just want to be rich, and I don't think any actually care about animals or justice. So.
Yeah.
Especially
where's your Lambo? Is it outside?
Yeah, I don't know.
And your Bugatti?
I think like Paul has like 73 Rolls Royces or something hiding somewhere.
Oh, really?
That's the thing. People confuse me for wanting to like
do something with
people
it.
think I care about lambs, but I really care about Lambos.
We should have done that. Right. No, we can go for the serious answer now.
Yeah, I mean, but in all honesty, like, I've never cared what people think of me. I've never done things for others, right? And, if you want to, do this for the wrong reason, I would say, like, there's a problem. And there might be people in the movement who are doing this for the wrong reason. There might be people who are exploiting the movement to push their own agendas, right? But I think the people that are real are easy to recognize, right? People who have sacrificed the most, people who aren't trying to, essentially turn this into some kind of marketing scheme. They're not trying to sell you something, are the ones to pay attention to. And yeah, for me, I might get recognition, I might get, praise or whatever, but, it might help me motivate me, right? But for me, my purpose and my joy are all related to what I'm actually doing and why I'm doing it. And I'm doing this for justice, I'm doing this for the victims, I'm doing this for the animals, and they are enough, they deserve their own movement, and I'm going to be here and I'm going to send their message.
Right. I think that's it then. Thank you so much for doing this with me.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it.
Thank you.